to another week of Morning Momentum. We have been talking through the month of April about being strong and healthy in various areas of our life, from physical to mental, emotional. And today we want to continue by talking about the health and strength of our spiritual man. If we're going to proceed forward and be what God has designed us to be, we cannot ignore our spiritual need, the need of our spiritual man to be strengthened. And so today, as we begin in our conversation of strengthening the spiritual man, there's no more important topic than prayer. Prayer is the area that most Christians find the most challenging in their spiritual disciplines. I can only speak for myself that is the case. It's one thing to read scripture because we get the instant benefit of knowledge and insight, but prayer is one of those things that requires faith. We're praying to someone we can't see and expecting an answer that we can't control. And like everything that requires faith, prayer runs contrary to the natural man and to the world in which we live, and thus is not only often neglected, but very difficult to do. F.B. Meyer, the author of the great book by the title of The Secret of Guidance, made this statement: "The great tragedy of life is not unanswered prayer, but unoffered prayer." If we're going to be honest this morning, we have to admit that prayer is, for the most part, an undisciplined area of our spiritual life. It is sporadic at best, erratic most of the time, and often more pathetic than powerful. It is an untapped resource, an unexplored continent where countless treasures remain to be unearthed. It is talked about more than anything else and practiced less than anything else. And yet, for the believer, it remains one of the necessary disciplines we must include in our spiritual lives if we're going to continue to be conformed into the image of Jesus Christ. Colossians chapter 4, verses 2 through 4 gives us the words of Paul concerning this thing called prayer. So let's take a quick look at that. "Continue," he says, "earnestly in prayer, being vigilant in it with thanksgiving. Meanwhile, praying also for us that God would open to us a door for the word to speak the mystery of Christ, for which I am also in chains, that I may make it manifest as I ought to speak." Paul understood prayer and its power. Prayer was an undeniable part of his life, and if you read through the portions of Scripture that God used him to write, you will find that over and over and over again, Paul is calling Christians to a place of prayer. The fact of the matter is, you cannot really be a growing Christian and not pray, just as you cannot have a growing, healthy marriage if you aren't speaking to your spouse. There are 4 very quick directives that I'm going to end with this morning that Paul gives us for us to consider on the power of prayer this morning. First of all, Paul says that we need to devote ourselves to prayer, or as other translation would say, continuing earnestly in prayer. In the original language, it says continue steadfastly in prayer. If we're going to untap the power of prayer, we've got to continue in that. Secondly, if you're persistent in something, it stands to reason that you would want to be passionate about it as well. In fact, Paul says we should be vigilant or be watchful. It is the opposite of being lazy. This describes passionate prayer. There's got to be continued prayer, and that prayer must be passionate. Thirdly, a constant theme that should run through our prayer is that of gratitude. Paul never fails to mention gratitude when he speaks of prayer. And last, intercessory prayer is basically praying for others. It is praying for God's will to be done in the lives of other people. Not only is there far too little prayer being offered these days, but much of what we are praying for is for us. God, give me this, give me that, bless me with this, give me favor in that, and so forth. And that really is the impetus of prayer in modern religion. Read the prayers of Jesus, and you would find that a majority of his prayer life was devoted to praying for others. So following these principles of prayer, being steadfast and dedicated, devoted in prayer, passionate prayer, and praying for others. And as we do that, unlocking the power of prayer and strengthening our spiritual man.